Welcome to the Father Figure Formula. Create moments that matter.
Okay, awesome. Today we have a very special guest for the Father Figure Formula Fireside Chat, Mr. Brad Moser. And Brad, I'll give you an opportunity to essentially introduce yourself here. It'll take about a minute or two to kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there, okay?
All right, sounds good.
So I understand you're a counselor of about 18 years. You're a father of two sons. You're also a therapist for dads, which I think is an amazing point of conversation here for us, and one reason why we're here, right? So, give us a little bit of context of your bio, your resume, and also your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a psychologist, I've been providing counseling, individual couples and family counseling for 18 years. I haven't been a psychologist for that whole period of time, but I think it's about 12 years now. But I've also, having and raising my two sons has been the most difficult and rewarding experience of my life. And then also kind of working through my own challenges of being a dad has inspired me to specialize in working with dads. And currently, I'm in private practice at Associates Counseling Services in Lethbridge. In my practice, I'm available for in-person, virtual, and telephone sessions for anyone living in Alberta.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I mean, I've got roots in Alberta as well, so I know that there's a little bit of a connection there. I think you hit some really interesting points here, especially revolving around, I think, maybe being the father who you want to be as you understand when you became a father, right? So let's kind of maybe rewind to the beginning here. Let's kind of talk about a little bit of your kind of origin story, kind of becoming a father. So what moment first made you feel like a father, not just a man with a child?
Absolutely. So with my firstborn son, Shay, I remember being in the hospital with him and holding him, and it was just a remarkable bonding experience. And I just heard this message come from him, and the message that I could hear from him is this message of "I need you," and I felt that connection and that need, and it just kind of just cemented it for me as the importance of my role, and it kind of made the meaning of my life from that point on.
Mm. That skin to skin contact, something about that initial holding of the child. I feel that too. I've got actually a picture of me with my son Ethan, where he's holding onto my finger, right? Yeah. And I think that "I need you" is that real punch in that line there. Yeah. I feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of called the attachment reflex. When you push your pinky onto their hand and they grab it, that shows that they're wanting that attachment. They need that attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. Amazing. So what's a chapter of fatherhood that tested you the most, and what kind of kept you steady throughout it?
Yeah. So just after the birth of my firstborn, Shay, I had some extreme busyness going on in my life. Not only was I dealing with the normal pressures and stress, anxiety, emotion, sleep deprivation that comes with your first child, but also working full time. I was also studying for the psychology licensing exam. And then after about a year of that, to get through all that busyness, I got through that professional business, and then I was able to put more time and energy into just being a dad and a co-parent. And so basically my first son there, Shay, he got me through that.
Bit of balance, I guess, is something that kind of kept you steady, right? That's definitely important.
Absolutely. Yeah, balance for sure. Yeah.
So if your younger father self was sitting here, what single line of wisdom would you whisper to him?
I would just kind of let him know that, it seems like a lot in the moment, but it does go by really quick, and just to make the most of every moment with your kids.
It certainly does go by quick.
Mm-hmm.
Quicker than I think most people expect. Like you hear people say it goes by fast, and you maybe kind of, I wouldn't say maybe brush it off, take it with a grain of salt, like whatever you say, but it definitely does go by fast. So I think living in the moment is definitely an important part of that. Yeah. So after helping families for nearly 2 decades, how did raising your own sons rewrite your definition of fatherhood?
Well, I learned the importance of presence, of being a present dad. And for me, that means getting involved, trying hard, making mistakes, trying to learn from them, And it's not about being perfect. It's about parenting your way, right? So what makes sense to you, with collaboration with others, like co-parent and family, friends and stuff like that, experts, all that stuff. But just trying to parent the way that you believe is most important for your kids, but also being flexible with changing and evolving your dad approach. And then also just having a well-rounded life, like seeing that parenting is an important part of life, but it's not the only part.
Love that. Yeah, we kind of also say like leading with intention, right?
Yes.
But the presence, like showing up, being there, and like I think you said, making mistakes, right? That's okay. That's a part of it. But understanding, I think, why, right? And how can we kind of be better? But you hit on some very important points there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of move, I guess, a little over to some things kind of talk about maybe stress, self, and the emotional load here. Okay, so you've carried so many stories into your work, but what did it kind of what did it take to stop carrying everyone else's pain home with you, or issues, right? Because I know that sometimes it's hard to draw the line between work and home life.
Absolutely. Just to be, what I find is I tend to I've struggled with anxiety through my life, and I've also struggled with overthinking and ruminating on things. So what helps with me, especially when I'm carrying on other people's pain from work, is I tend to ruminate. And so what I try to do is I try to be aware of what my feelings are. Try to sit with those emotions. Try to welcome those emotions rather than pushing them away or overthinking it. And that really helps me a lot. That just kind of helps me stay kind of centered and with my emotions, and also just kind of helps me cope with some of that stress that's coming from outside of home, basically.
Sit with your emotions. That's an interesting point, because I feel like as men, and there's a lot of times where we don't want to sit with those emotions. Right? Yeah. I'm actually reading a book called Radical Acceptance, and it's literally talking about just sitting with yourself and letting those kind of emotions pass through you and kind of giving it time to pass rather than kind of sit and really stew. You're just kind of letting it go, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So between clients, kids, and career, like what actually worked to manage your stress, and maybe what has completely failed on the other end? So maybe some tools in your toolbox.
Absolutely. So for me, what's really important is taking care of myself, self-care, and that includes exercise, sleep, nutrition, time to myself, relationships. And that can be a lot of work. It does take time. It takes energy to do all those things, but it definitely was worthwhile. I could find that it feeds me, it helps me stay connected, and then also just trying to be my authentic self is really important as well. And then when it fails too for me is when I'm not taking care of myself, when I'm taking on too much, either personally and professionally, and when I'm not being my authentic self, when I'm focusing on becoming what others want instead of what I want, basically.
Good call outs there. Good calls. Authenticity. I love that one. Yeah. So what are like some quiet warning signs you've seen when a dad's like maybe burning out, and how can he catch himself sooner, or maybe understand the situation he's in when maybe they're not aware, right?
Yeah, I find that burning out, it does come from maybe a lack of awareness or avoidance, and this is kind of where we might resort to old ineffective coping strategies. So this could be stuff like using alcohol or drugs or porn, and those are all different avoidance strategies of avoiding the pain, avoiding the emotions. And so I find that that's one. And then also when the old patterns return and come back, and we don't bounce back, and again, that's avoidance, or we move away from our values as well. I think that can get us caught up as well.
Yeah, patterns. That's a big one, right? And I think a lot of people don't maybe pick up on some of those patterns, or maybe they see them as not something that's stuck with them. Like you kind of talked about things that have kind of come up from the past, right? Yeah. Oh, it's okay. It's once or twice. It's something that was in the past, right? But it's still a pattern. Maybe just something that has extended duration there. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So in your view, how does emotional awareness become the turning point for healing a father's inner wounds?
From my perspective, I find like our inner wounds are exacerbated by avoiding our emotions, right? And so that's where emotional awareness and acceptance are key to feeling better and working towards healing from our wounds. And that's easier done than said. This does take, sitting with your feelings can be extremely hard. It does take blood, sweat and tears, and it also takes practice, but that can eventually help us feel like you talked about earlier, about allowing yourself to feel those feelings and then pass through, and then to work on, okay, what do I need to work on now, kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the first step is definitely the awareness, right? And the acknowledgement that they are there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So now kind of moving on to, I could say maybe the time and presence elements here. Like, obviously fatherhood changes your relationship with time. So when did the clock start to feel real different for you after becoming a dad?
Well, it was my first Father's Day, again with my firstborn. When I love Father's Day, especially in daycare at school. Usually, especially when the kids are younger, they create so many amazing gifts for us as dads, like different mementos and poems and stuff like that. And I keep all that stuff. And so the first Father's Day, I got this poem. He was at daycare, and they made this poem, and he like colored it or whatever he did with it. And the poem was called "Walk a Little Slower, Daddy." And it's you can find that anywhere if you Google it or whatever, you'll find it. And it's just a beautiful poem. And for me, even just now when I read it, it brings tears to my eyes, and it did back then too, because it just reminded me of the importance that I need to slow down. I need to go at their pace, because often I'm going really fast and trying to get things done and everything, but just slow it down and be there for your child and be at their pace, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a little craft area behind my desk here that I like to look at. And there's all those little reminders, and some of them are pretty amazing and some of them are just silly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So was there a moment when you realized presence mattered more than, I guess, kind of provision, and maybe what triggered that? I know you kind of had touched on the presence element, but let's maybe dig in a little deeper there.
Yeah, so all throughout my life growing up, I believe that I had this belief that in order to be loved, I needed to perform. I needed to do something. I needed to be kind, to give to others, make money, fix things, things like that. And what I've learned is that from my, being a dad and having a family, is I learned that being myself and being there are most important, right? And some of the moments that I've had that reminding me about that are things like, still today, when I phone or I talk to my kids on the phone, or I text them when I'm at work, and I connect with them, I feel that connection that just brings me back to, they just want me, they just love me for who I am. And then, when they were really young, I just remember seeing how excited they got when I got home from work and they came running to me. And now even just my teen son, when kids become teens, they start to want to disconnect from their parents, but just even hearing him say, "Good morning, Dad," that just kind of helps me feel grounded and connected.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's when you least expect it. I find those are the times too, when you kind of least expect it, where it comes, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't ask for that. I didn't expect it. It just connected. Yeah, it really hits that much more. So these days, how do you guard your time for what truly matters most?
So I find like scheduled events are easiest, right? So that's kind of like, going to their sports, school events, and making sure you can arrange that you can be there and book that time for yourself. That makes it the easiest. You make it a priority. And then the whole idea of like, just when you're with them, just really be with them, right? So you're not on your phone, you're not, distracted. And this is a term I came up with myself. It's called zombie parenting. And that's something that I've fallen into in my life. So I'm not judging any other parents or anything like that, but I know that's kind of when we're on our phone or when we're distracted with other things or in our own head, and we're not really there with our kids. So I'm trying to stay away from that zombie parenting and just really being with them.
Zombie parenting. I love that. I might have to use that at some point. Give you some credit for that. Yeah, no, but it's true, right? It is in a form of zombies. Maybe appropriate since it's the week before Halloween. So,
yes, yeah.
But maybe a costume. Yeah, but that's it. So if we audited the average dad's week, where are men kind of leaking the moments that build their legacy?
I mean, for a big part for me is men and I know it's from my own experience too, that when we're not at home, those are times when that we might leak that legacy, or we might leak that disconnection, right? And so I think that, that's one of the biggest concerns or challenges that I know dads I work with and myself face, is not feeling like we have no time with our kids, right? And so, because we're working a lot, or we're working away from home, or whatever. And so I think what helps with that is trying to make the most of it when we are at home. So just basically like navigating our energy levels to be more engaged with our kids. Like, for example, dads who work late, that we get, we're there in the morning for our kids. We get them ready for school. We have a breakfast with them and stuff like that. If we work early, then we can be there to put our kids to sleep, stuff like that. If we only see our kids on weekends because we're working out of town or whatever, we're trying to really be there on the weekends and trying to avoid the whole, dynamic that can happen between moms and dads when the dad's gone for a long period of time, is a whole Disneyland dad, Cinderella mom kind of dynamic, right? Where mom's kind of like Cinderella throughout the week, and then dad comes home and the kids are excited, but just trying to be there for the kids and really make the most of that. So does that kind of make sense? Kind of the different ways of how we can manage our energy levels and stuff like that, and really be there with our kids?
Yeah, and that's an interesting topic of being away from the home, right? Because there's probably some fathers that when they're away from home, it's a bit of an escape, or for some, it's maybe a reset, right?
Yeah.
Or for some, it is work related, so they don't really have, quote unquote, a choice. But there's even the balance, I think, and the communication, I think, is what you're mentioning here in those moments. And how do we still align with what we're trying to accomplish, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's maybe kind of talk about, some elements, I could say, I guess, wisdom from the work, right? Because again, you've seen, I think, both the connected elements, and I'm sure that the deeply connected dads, right? So what's kind of the key pattern that really separates the two?
I find that the biggest pattern is when you're more connected with your kids, I find you're more connected with yourself, right? And we can do that in so many ways. We're wanting to make sure we're moving towards our values. And if you're not sure what your values are, you could, go online and look at value lists or value checklists and kind of be able to find the values that are most important to you. When we're moving towards our values, we feel more embodied. We feel more empowered. We feel like we are more connected to ourselves, right? If we're living our life more intentionally, I find like we're more connected with ourselves. And then we can also be connected with ourselves by being the best version of ourselves. So that's professionally, personally. Also having a balanced personal, professional life is a big role of that. And then when we're connected with ourselves, I find we can be more connected with our kids. So that's when we can be invested in their lives, right? So all aspects of their lives, academically, socially, their interests, right? And then also involving them in our life is really cool too, right? So our interests, our hobbies. So if you're not like me, if you're good with your hands and you're good at fixing stuff and building stuff, I mean, kids just love that stuff. Anything that you're good at as a dad, I think kids just gravitate towards that naturally.
Completely agree. And I feel like there's kind of like an inner child in ourselves. And at times I find that kind of shining through when I'm with my kids, whether it's kind of being silly or kind of being crafty or just really inquisitive and curious, right? Yeah, that really resonates. Yeah. So what's a common kind of lie fathers quietly believe about themselves, and how do you help them rewrite that?
I think a big lie that we sometimes assume, maybe as dads or men in general, is that we have to be perfect. And so as dads, we find like we have to be perfect dad, right? There's no such thing as perfect dad. There's no such thing as perfect parent. We just need to be ourselves, right? And so I think that the more that we embrace our strengths and our imperfections, then the healthier person and dad that we're going to be. We all make mistakes, and the important thing is to obviously learn from them, and also with our kids to own our mistakes, especially when those mistakes involve them, right? And to apologize and stuff like that. They learn a lot from that, and that helps reconnect with them as well when we do make mistakes.
Yeah, I've been really trying to teach my kids accountability right from the get-go. I think that's a big trait that's kind of lacking out there. I feel like that's one trait that I tend to usually go back to, especially it finds to be one of the more common negative patterns that I see in speaking with people, especially fathers over time. And whether that's with themselves or with their kids, right? I think that's something to keep in mind. Yeah. So, what's kind of one small mindset shift that creates immediate change in the men that you counsel?
Just the message that fatherhood is a lifelong journey, that it is, we may feel like we're failing or we're not doing good, but it is a lifelong journey, and you do have opportunities for connection with your kids throughout their lives. And just the idea of embracing the valleys and the peaks. Like, there's going to be times where you're going to be feeling on top of the world and connect with your kids, other times where you maybe won't, or maybe times where you're personally are struggling, and that when we struggle personally, it can affect our relationships with others too. So just to embrace those times that those do happen, and that we all do make mistakes, and not be afraid of them, right? Not be afraid to do something because we're afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, one day at a time, right? Not every day is sunshine and on the beach, right? Some days are going to be thunderstorms, and some days there's going to be other forms of bad weather. But yeah, I guess it's kind of how you weather that storm, right? That's great. So more the marathon, not the race, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So how do you guide dads from, getting through the day to enjoying, being a dad again?
Yeah, we want to try, obviously, that's a good question, because we want to try to avoid the whole Groundhog Day thing that we feel like every day is the same day. Yeah. So I think prioritizing the most important things is very helpful, right? So prioritizing the quality time with your kids, the relationships you have with each of them, and the time you also have with other important people in your life is important as well. That helps you, fuels your energy. It helps you feel connected, and then also the important things like self-care, right? So very important for our own health, and then also just seeing that maybe other things in our life, like it could be social media, it could be emails, it could even be work, maybe aren't as important, or maybe it's more important to invest our energy into other things than those things, kind of thing. Right. So just being aware of that.
Yeah, I definitely feel that prioritization is like a skill, right? Yeah. It's something that, a tool in the toolbox that you can sharpen over time. Yeah. And I think, the time management element for sure, especially kind of getting through a day, right? Yeah. Interesting points. Okay. So now let's maybe move on to, I think communication is the backbone of every relationship, whether it's work or personal, or kind of with your spouse or partner. So every stage of fatherhood, I think, reshapes communication in a way. So how has the way you speak with your sons evolved, and what had to change, and what kind of stayed sacred throughout that time?
Yeah, so I had to really learn as my older son became a teenager, that I had to evolve my approach in how I address him, how I talk to him, I connect with him, and to see that it's kind of for me, it's a transition from manager to consultant, right? So rather than just kind of being the boss, I'm more of, okay, I'm allowing you to grow, and I'm going to be there if you have questions or if you need guidance or whatnot. And then the other part about that had to evolve for me, and the sacred part that is going to has remained, and I'd like it to stay that way, is the importance of showing vulnerability with our kids, but also love.
Love, yes, that's always going to be there. At least it should be there, right? And maybe that's even the disconnect that I'm sure you find. And I think even going back to the kind of conversation you mentioned about being able to have some of these elements in yourself to be able to shine through to your kids, love is definitely at the forefront. Empathy in a way, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So
for the dad who feels distant from his kids or partner, what's the first bridge you'd help him build? And that might even be the love yourself kind of element, but...
Yeah, it could be that the connecting with yourself, but also just really trying to focus on the making it a priority again, the strengthening your relationship with your kids is usually a good way to bridge that.
So what anchor phrases, say affirmations, boundaries, or apologies, have become your kind of go-to at home?
So it's kind of like three statements that I find are really important. I try to repeat these to my kids. And the first one is, I love you no matter what, right? So kind of that whole unconditional love part. And then the part about, I'm proud of you for trying. So it just really, I try to really praise the trying part, not so much the achievement, it's more the trying. And then the other part is, you are enough, right? Like, again, the whole unconditional regard that you are enough, just being you, basically.
And do you use those kind of on a regular basis? Like, how often would you say you go back to those phrases? Obviously, it's probably changed over time, but...
Yeah, it does depend on, the day and everything else, but I do try to reinforce those when possible.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
and they can be expressed in different ways too. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We have some as well that we like to use, and I think one of the focal points we find using
Mhm.
somewhat recently is, I can do hard things, right? Because
Right.
it seems like a
Yes.
lot of things seem to be
Mhm.
very difficult and
Mhm.
hard these days, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So, how much does the way a man talks to himself really shape the way he shows up for his family?
Yeah, the positive self-talk is so important. Positive self-talk essentially influences positive talk to your kids as well. If we can talk positively and kind and gentle to ourselves, we're more likely to be kind and gentle towards our kids. And then that eventually, especially if they're young kids before the age of 10, if they hear a lot of those positive talk messages to them, then that becomes their self-talk, right? So they're going to have more of that positive self-talk for themselves.
Mm.
Yeah.
And why, I guess, I guess this comes to the
Mm.
development aspects, why it's before
Mm.
10, right? So things
Yeah.
that'll kind of carry them on, especially when they're dealing
Yeah.
with maybe their peers
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
more pressure situations. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on to another kind of section, I guess, here of conversation. And we've kind of coined this term the father mark. So it's our word for, the kind of emotional and relational imprint a dad leaves, essentially through presence, habits, love. So it's not, again, perfection. It's being intentional, right? And that's
Mm.
kind of what's,
Mhm.
being passed on through time here. So
Mhm.
when your sons become fathers, what pieces of your father mark do you hope they carry forward?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I really like this definition of father mark, and I like that you guys are using this. But basically, the ones that I want them to move forward um, is the importance of caring for yourself and others.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've got some elements from my grandmother of always kind of be nice to other people, and like
Yeah. Mhm.
if you can make other people happy, it'll make yourself happy. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that's really kind of stuck through for
Mhm.
is a father mark on my end here personally. So
Mhm.
so what
Mhm.
part of your father mark are you already proud of today?
I'm just seeing how they interact with their friends, their peers, their classmates. Like with my 9-year-old now, I went to his yeah, they had their they had a special event at school, and I went there and I got to see him in his classroom interact with his classmates. I was just really honored to see how we talked to his peers, how he talked to the teacher. He just seemed like a really nice kid, and I've heard that from his teachers in the past, and I got to see that, and that was just amazing. And just the whole, and same with my teen as well. So the parts about being kind, gentle, considerate, I just love seeing that. And it's like my hard work is paying off. You know what I mean? Like of having them, of me living with those values and seeing them take them on as well.
I actually dropped off or was picking up my daughter recently, and another parent came up to me and basically said, "Your daughter Savannah is the nicest kid in school. She says
Mhm.
hello to everyone. She says bye."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Wow, that's yeah. I'm totally
Yeah.
aligned with what you're saying. That's such a
Yeah.
special feeling, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you're seeing it firsthand."
Mhm.
So how has your vision of legacy evolved? From your 30s to now. What does lasting impact look like to you now, maybe versus then?
Yeah, so and this is kind of cool because actually my when I've talked about my firstborn son and how I learned a lot from him, especially he was actually born on my 30th birthday, so we have the same birthday.
Oh, amazing,
Yeah,
amazing.
so yeah, so if ever people ask me how old am I have to think, okay, take my son and add 30, and that's
Yeah.
so basically, when I was in my 30s, that's when I had all this energy. I was just this new dad and everything. And now I'm kind of focused more, is less of a focus on the super dad, whole super dad of being super energetic and everything and just being this kind of crazy clown dad, to more of just being more grounded, more purposeful, more of a value driven dad. And the lasting impact that I'm seeing with them is just seeing my sons become the teens and the young men that they're choosing to become. I find that really rewarding. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting that they've chosen to become. Yeah. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably even maybe different than what you expected at first, I imagine, because
Mm-hmm.
they're
Yeah.
kind of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And
Yeah.
obviously it's different when we're kids, but to
Mm-hmm.
think about it as a father, what we want our kids to be, it's
Mm-hmm.
not our choice really. And we kind of have to
Mm-hmm.
step back and
Mm-hmm.
let them decide. But that's an interesting conversation. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if your great grandkids heard one sentence about you generations from now, what do you hope it would be? One sentence. I know it's
Just
kind of
one
hard.
sentence.
Just one
I know it
sentence.
is a hard one, but just he loved me for who we are,
Hmm.
or he loved us for who we are. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we're gonna fire off a few questions here in
Sure.
succession. So we'll
Okay.
we'll try for the quick answers if
Hmm.
possible. So,
Hmm.
what's the most underrated superpower of a father?
I'm gonna pick two. The first is his presence,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
being himself.
Favorite dad ritual or tradition?
And this is something that my two and the boys and I share. It's called Shea Retton Daddy Day, and it's a special day that we have, the three of us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Most healing phrase you've ever heard in a counseling room?
I'm working on myself.
Best line for a dad who feels like he's failing?
What's one small step you can take towards connecting or reconnecting with your kids?
Hmm. So I guess final reflection here. Let's kind of talk about how would you define a great father? Not the perfect one that does not exist, but an actual real one. How would you define that?
So I'm just going to kind of go back to my previous answer about when I was talking about rewriting my definition of fatherhood, and that's the whole part about being a present dad. I find that's about being a real dad, where, again, being a present dad means trying hard, making mistakes, trying to learn from them, not being perfect, parenting your way, but also being flexible and changing and evolving your approach to dadhood by experience and talking with others, but also having a well-rounded life, right? And that's so important. So that's what I find is most important.
So the dad watching this who feels tired, behind, or disconnected, what's the one thing you want him to hear right now?
And you mean the world to your kids. Take care of yourself and try to connect with them.
And finally, what's your personal mantra? The line that kind of keeps you grounded when life gets heavy.
This is one I keep going back to. It's embrace the mess, right? So having kids, being a dad, being a person is messy, and we can't make it perfect. We can't just keep cleaning it up. We just also just need to embrace it. That this is a part of learning. It's a part of life.
Brad, you're saying all the right things here, and it really kind of shows your experience, your know-how, and obviously the relationship you have with your own kids and family, right? I think that definitely shows through. So let's maybe take a minute to give yourself maybe an additional plug here. Tell us how people can potentially connect with you, site, socials, all that jazz. It would take a minute to do that, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Lance. And so you can find my website is Brad Moser Psychologist. .ca, so Brad Moser Psychologist, all in one word. And on there, if you would like to, as I mentioned, if you live within the province of Alberta, you can see me for counseling. I also have a podcast called Real Dads with Brad Moser. So if you look on Spotify under Real Dads with Brad Moser, the podcast, you'll find that. Also on my website, which I just stated, my podcast is available there. And then on social media, I'm available on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn if you just search Brad Moser Psychologist. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm happy to report that I'll be joining your podcast in 2026 as well for conversation. So we'll get an opportunity to do that again. And I think, we're here for the right reasons. We're here for the right causes. I think this is something that's needed. I think this is something that's going to be growing from a community basis. And I think, fathers need this. Dads need this. I think men in general need this. This is one reason why we call this the father figure. We've actually spoken with some fathers who essentially, maybe haven't birth the children up, but they have come into, blended families, relationships, and they're walking into this being, what do I do here? Especially if they're walking into a relationship where there's teens, or maybe there are fresh babies. It's really, I think, an important bit of business that we're doing here. And I'm sure it's for ourselves, but also in the end, it's for the people out there. So, Brad, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I'm glad we can connect, and I look forward to doing this again soon.
Yeah, me as well. Thanks so much, Lance.